All right, so today we're going to be looking into the resignation of U.S. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy. This is effective Monday. This is the end of his 5-year term, which started at the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic and included elections where mail-in voting was a big thing. His departure is happening with all this reported pressure from the Trump administration about political control of the postal system. And you might remember back in February, there were reports that said DeJoy was going to stay until his successor was kicked. If you find this interesting so far, please like and subscribe. So let's dig into why he's resigning. It looks like there's been tension recently between DeJoy and the Trump administration, especially about the work of the US DOGE service, the Department of Government Efficiency. This tension apparently contributed to the White House not really liking DeJoy. It's important to remember DeJoy was hired back when Trump was president the first time, and he was hired by a postal board with a lot of Trump appointees on it. So when DOGE folks got their Postal Service HQ, things got a little sticky about access. DeJoy apparently resisted giving Lumley access to agency systems that DOGE was used to in other parts of the government. Instead, he insisted that the DOGE people go to these long briefings with the leaders of each Postal Service department. To make things even trickier, DeJoy sent a letter to Congress saying he had given the DOGE team the power to go after policy changes that needed Congress to act. This move really annoyed lawmakers and administration officials. To add to all this, administration officials talked with Jim Cochran recently. He's the CEO at the Package Shippers Association. It's a group that represents Amazon, DHL, FedEx, all the big names. These meetings were about who could replace DeJoy. The Washington Post even said back in February that Cochran, he's a former Postal Service exec himself, was a top contender. So DeJoy said in February he'd retire and stay on until the governing board picks someone new. But now he's leaving right away. Deputy Postmaster General Doug Tulino, the guy who runs the agency waiver stuff, will be in charge for now. All this is happening while people like Trump and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick are talking about maybe making the Postal Service private or merging it with Commerce. Back in February, reports came out that Trump was about to make an executive order to get rid of the Postal Service's governing board and its independent regulatory agency, and he wanted to put Lutnick in charge. Trump himself said he was thinking about it at a news conference, but then people in the administration started wondering if Lutnick could actually run the Postal Service without a board. So the administration backed off from the order, but bigwigs at the Postal Service were still kind of bracing for the White House to step in. It's really important to point out that any big changes to how the Postal Service is set up would need Congress to say yes. The Postal Service is its own agency with a bipartisan board, and the people on that board are picked by the president and approved by the Senate. That board hires and watches over the Postmaster General and makes the big decisions about service and how much things cost. So how does DeJoy feel about all this? Well, he said he's sure the Postal Service is in a good spot to keep going with its transformation and modernization plans. He also said he's been working with Doug Tulino to make sure the transition goes smoothly. And when Nick Reynolds, he is the chair of the Board of Governors, said DeJoy is a fighter and thanked him for his work. It's worth noting that the board didn't always agree on his Delivering for America plan. That was the one with higher prices and slower delivery to get things financially stable in the long run. But they did all support DeJoy when the Trump administration was thinking about shaking things up at the USPS. DeJoy himself said in February that he asked the board to start looking for his replacement, even though there wasn't any sign he was leaving soon. He says he's been leading a big 5-year effort to restructure the USPS, which included cutting those predictive losses we were talking about. He did things kind of like the Musk-led DOGE team, like cutting staff and redoing contracts. A while back, he said he was going to cut 10,000 jobs and billions from the budget. DeJoy was appointed in 2020 and was in charge during the presidential election when so many people voted by mail because of the pandemic. And the Postal Service did manage to deliver all those ballots without too many problems. So what are people saying about DeJoy leaving? Well, Kevin Yoder, who used to be a Republican congressman and is now the head of Keep the U.S. Posted, said he was glad DeJoy was going, but he also said he was worried about the damage DeJoy might have done in the long run. Yoder said things like raising prices and making deliveries slower need to stop. On the money side of things, the Postal Service is expecting to lose $9.5 billion for the fiscal year ending September 30th. That's after losing $6.5 billion the year before. DeJoy said the Postal Service has 640,000 employees right now. The price of stamps has gone up by 36% since 2019 from 50 cents to 73 cents. That's 6 price hikes. It's interesting that the USPS, with all those employees, didn't have to cut jobs like other federal agencies when DOGE was in charge. Elon Musk said this month that the USPS should be privatized, and last week the White House made the head of Amtrak leave. So far, the White House hasn't said anything about whether they had a hand in DeJoy's resignation. It's worth noting that DeJoy gave DOGE a list of things they could help with, and he even signed an agreement with them earlier this month. So to wrap up, Postmaster General Louis DeJoy is out. Effective immediately, he was in charge for 5 years, a time that included elections during a pandemic, pressure from the Trump administration, and wars gang staying with the DRG team. He's leaving while everyone's talking about what's going to happen to the Postal Service and whether it should be private. Deputy Postmaster General Doug Tulino will be in charge until the board finds a permanent replacement. Thanks for listening. If you thought this was interesting, please like and subscribe for more deep dive. See you next time.